Hello everybody, today we're going to be looking at setting up our Vue development environment in Lumen, which is Laravel's microservice framework. We're going to be looking at how we can use Webpack to implement hot reloading and set up our Vue single file components. This one's quite involved, so make sure you've had your morning cup of coffee and let's get into the video. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is create our Lumen project. So I'm going to change into my project directory, which is YouTube projects, like so. And then we're going to want to use composer, create project. That creates our Lumen project. We want to prefer the distributable and Laravel Lumen, like so, and I'm just going to pop that into my Vue Lumen folder, hit enter, and we should get that installed. Okay, now that's all installed, we're going to want to open that up in our IDE. I use PHP Storm and I've already opened it up here. And the first thing you're going to want to do in any Lumen project is generate a key for our app. Now, unlike Laravel, it doesn't have the generate key artisan command, so you're going to have to find another way to generate it. I just use OpenSSL because it's installed on my computer. So I just have to type in OpenSSL rand, and I can just generate a random base64 string. There we go, 32 characters long. That can be my key. And if I come back over here, I can paste that in, and that's the app key set. Okay, something you might notice is that Lumen doesn't actually generate a package JSON file. That's just because it may well just be an API, it may have no front end at all. So we're going to actually have to generate the package JSON file ourselves. And to do that, we're going to want to change into our project directory, cd vue lumen, and then we're going to want to go npm init, and then it will run us through a little guide to generate our package JSON file. So the package name, Vue Lumen version 1, description, I'm just going to call it Vue Lumen template. The entry point, index.js, is fine. We don't need a test command at the moment. We're not going to set up a repository for this just yet. We don't need keywords. The author, I might as well type my name in, Craig. Put it out under the MIT license, and then we can just confirm that everything is okay. That all looks fine. And if I hit yes and come back over to PHP Storm, you should see that our package JSON file has actually been generated for us. So we can start installing some npm packages. Okay, so the first npm package that we're going to want to install is going to be Vue, obviously. And we're also going to want to bring in the Vue template compiler to compile our single file components. So we just need to do npm install Vue and Vue template compiler, and we'll save that as a in our development part of the package JSON and hit enter. That should bring that in for us. Fantastic. And now if we go over to our package JSON file, you'll see that under dev dependencies we have Vue and the Vue template compiler. So the first thing we're going to want to do is have somewhere where we're going to put our Vue app, and I'm going to put that in resources, and I'm going to create a folder called assets, new directory, there we go, and assets, so, and then I'm going to create another new directory called JS, and then a further directory called components, like so, and then I'm going to create our app component, or our app.vue component. So if I come over here, PHP Storm generates Vue components for you, so I'm just going to call this app, hit enter, and you can see we've got a little bit of boilerplate there. I'm just going to create our root divs, and then I'm just going to type a message, and that message is just going to be, hello Lumen, I'm Vue. Okay, so the next thing we're going to want to do is create an entry point for our app so that we can create a Vue instance to mount this our main Vue component onto. And so I'm going to do that in assets.js directory, and we're going to create a new, and it's going to be a JavaScript file, and I'm going to call that app. And then the first thing we're going to want to do is import Vue, like so. And we're also going to want to import app. We'll import that from, and we're going to put in components with a capital C with app.vue. And I'm going to explain that in a second because we are actually going to be creating an alias in our Webpack config so that it knows where to go and find app.vue, which is why that's components with a capital C, but we'll look at that in a minute. And so we create our new Vue instance, so new Vue, and then we need to put in our render. And you don't really need to worry too much about what all of this means. There's lots of standard stuff. It's basically the same each time when you're using Vue 2. I think that's actually changed in Vue 3. I think there's a create app. I think it's a create app rather than new Vue, but obviously at the minute Vue 2 is the one that is in production. So we're just going to use Vue 2. But if you're using Vue 3, you may need to use the create app function instead. And we're going to mount that onto a div called app, which we haven't yet created, so we better go and do that. So in order to create our element to mount our Vue instance onto, we're going to want to create a new blade file, and we're going to put that in resources views. And so I'm going to create a new blade file, and I'll call that app also. And if I hit enter, you'll see that there's quite a lot of boilerplate that has been imported for me. I've already written this. I use this boilerplate all of the time. Essentially, as you can see here in this bit I've highlighted, there's the app div that our Vue instance will be mounted onto. If you come back over to app.js, that's what this mount app refers to. And then we've got a little bit of blade markup here. Essentially, it's saying if the app.env or environment variable is set to local, we're going to bring in our development scripts, and if it's not set to local, we're just going to be bringing in our production scripts. In this video, we're not going to be looking at how we produce this production script, but we are going to be looking at how we produce this development script. So in order to produce this development script so that we can fill in whatever this source is, we're going to need to pull in Webpack, and we're going to need to pull in Webpack dev server, which we can do now. So to install Webpack, we just need to come over to our terminal, and we just want to put npm install Webpack. We're also going to want to bring in the Webpack CLI, and we want to bring in Webpack dev server, save dev, hit enter, and that should install all of that into our project for us. Once that's installed, we need to create a Webpack config, which we can do in the root of our project. So I'm just going to put touch webpack.config.js and hit enter. And if we come over here, you should see this create this empty JavaScript file for me. And the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to put module exports, and we want to put this into development mode, like so. And we are going to want to create our entry. And so what that development mode just does is it actually allows us to access a variable that tells us it's in development inside JavaScript. We're not going to be looking at that today, but if you're doing development projects, your Webpack development script should say development or mode development in it, just in case you ever want to check that your that the environment that you're working in is the development environment. Right. So the other thing we want, obviously, we're now on to entry. So we want our entry, and our entry will be, oops, resources. That's our app.js file here. So it's resources, assets, JS, then app.js. So that's the beginnings of our Webpack file, but we're also going to want somewhere to output our file. So we create output like so, and then we'll output and we'll give it a file name of app.js. So nice and easy. That's just the start of our Webpack, our Webpack config. And it just basically says this is where you find the entry file, which is our own resources, assets, JS, and then app.js. That's that one there that I just clicked on. And this is just saying, well, this is the file name that we want to output. The next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to set up our dev server. And to do that, we're going to create dev server, like so. And oops, it would help if I type that correctly, dev server. And then we're going to want to fill in all of the details for our dev server, which will be all of our development environment details. Okay, so the first thing we're going to add is our public path, and that's just basically the folder where our file is going to be output, so app.js. So it will be output in js app.js. Nothing too complicated there. And then we're going to want to turn on hot reloading, and to do that we type in hot true, and that means that each time we save, make a change and save a file, it automatically gets updated in the browser without us having to refresh. But in order to do that, we're going to need to change some of the headers. Otherwise, we get a cause issue as the PHP server attempts to access the Webpack dev server. So for our headers, we're going to want to change access control, allow origin, and then that just becomes a star. That just allows our servers to communicate with each other. Not very safe in a production environment, so don't do that in a production environment, but we're fine to do that for development. Next, we want to set up our host, and for our purposes, it's going to be localhost. And I'm going to put our local host. I'm going to put our local host or our Webpack server onto port 8081, so it doesn't clash with our PHP server, which we're going to fire up on port 8080. Now, it's probably important that we also have a look at this watch options and poll false. If you're using Vagrant, you need to put that in. So that's also for Homestead. So I just put required for Vagrant. That's to do with the way that Webpack sends messages through its file system. It's quite complicated, but it is inside the documentation that you need to do that with Vagrant. Otherwise, it can have issues. So just make sure you put that in. Now, if you've ever used Webpack before, you'll know that we use loaders to transform our code. And for our project here, we're going to want to bring in a few loaders. So the first one, we'll come over here, we're going to go npm install, and we're going to obviously want to bring in Vue loader for our Vue files. We're going to bring in Babel loader to transpile our modern JavaScript, style loader, which is for our styles, and CSS loader. Save dev. Now, because we're using Babel, we also are going to want to bring in Babel core and Babel preset env. So we want to npm install and then Babel core and also Babel, and then that's preset env. And that allows us to transpile our modern JavaScript into JavaScript that can be read by the browser. You'll be seeing me using those inside the Webpack config in a second. So let's just get those installed. Okay, now that we've downloaded our loaders or installed our loaders, we're going to want to tell Webpack when to use them. So we want to put that in module, and module can take an array of rules, like so. Make sure we put that in there. And rules is just a set of objects for us to test against so that we can use our loader. So we'll create test, and we want to say anything that ends in .vue or any of our Vue files. You want to make sure that we apply Vue loader, so, and same thing for any of our CSS files. We want to say, make sure we create a new object, sorry, test, and then we do exactly the same thing, test, CSS, anything that ends in CSS, then we're going to use style loader and CSS loader. The other loader that we're going to want to use will be Babel, and we're going to want to use that on our JavaScript files or .js files. So once again, test, and unsurprisingly, our regex will be anything that ends in JS. And I forgot to do that over at CSS, so make sure we put that $ in to say ends in. And for that, we're going to want to put loader, and that will be Babel loader. Now, Babel loader can take a set of options, and so this was our presets option. So it goes options, presets, and that's going to be our Babel preset env. Babel preset env, and that just tells Babel that it needs to use the Babel preset env on our JavaScript file. So that's not going to be running on our Vue files. That's just going to be on our JavaScript files. So that might be for things for Vuex, so that we can use modern JavaScript. There are a series of these kind of preset options in Babel. The preset env one is the one that basically does everything, so we don't have to micromanage it. If you do want to micromanage your loaders a little bit more, or your Babel transpiling a little bit more, then you can take a look on their website for the other loaders that they've got. Okay, one final thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to use our Vue Loader plugin. And oops, I forgot to put that there. Good eyes if you noticed that. And so we're going to create a plugins section inside our Webpack. And we want to put new Vue Loader plugin, which is here. So new Vue Loader plugin. I haven't actually brought that in yet, so let's actually require that at the top. So we put const Vue Loader plugin equals require, and then let's just bring that all in. So it's Vue Loader lib plugin. So that just tells Webpack to apply the Vue Loader plugin. Plugins are basically things that loaders can't do, so it's just extra stuff that Vue needs to do to get our code running properly. Okay, to finish up our Webpack config, we're going to do a couple of final things. The first one is we're going to use this resolve so that we can alias some of our directories. So resolve alias, and if you remember over here in app.js, we put this components with a big C. We're going to create an alias for that. Basically, we're going to tell Webpack exactly what components means inside our config. So what we're going to do here is alias, and it will be components. So that's the components with a big C, as you can see there. And then we're going to want to do path.resolve. Now path is a node package. We'll just bring that in. So const path equals require path. And so we've got path, resolve, and their name, which is just the directory name. Essentially for our purposes here, we're going to be looking at the root directory, and we're going to be, if you remember where we put it, resources, assets, components. So that's it. We've basically just created an alias to the components directory. So it just makes it nice and easy so that if we were to move things around from different directories, we can basically tell Webpack where to find that directory without having to change lots and lots of files. So it's really good practice to make sure that you actually put aliases in just for future-proofing your app. And the final thing we're going to do is we're going to add our source maps just for debugging. So DevTool source map. And that's it. That should be our Webpack config file complete. Okay, now we've finished our Webpack config, we're going to want to add a root to our Lumen project. So we want to go to roots at web.php, and you'll see there's a default root in here. And we're just going to take that out, and we're going to do router get. And then for our Vue project, we're going to want to put in this little bit of regex, which basically tells Lumen what route to match. So basically, it's going to be any standard route. This would allow us to use Vue router in the future. So anything with a /, anything with a word character, any kind of dot and a hash, and any amount of time. If you can add any other things in you want for yours, but that's the one that that's the regex that I use for any Vue router. And then we just want to return our app.blade file. So that just references app.blade here. So that's what it's saying. It's saying when you get any route with this matching, sorry, I forgot to actually put that a colon in here. So this is slightly different from the Laravel route matching. Lumen's one is a little bit more lightweight, but this would apply in Laravel as well. So basically we're saying whenever we go to this route, then load up app.blade. And if we come over to app.blade, you'll see that we haven't yet put in our development script. And our development script is actually going to be our local host, which will be our Webpack server. So HTTP local host, and it's going to be 8081. If you remember in our Webpack config here, 8081. So that's what that refers to. And then JS, if you remember once again, that's that public path bit there. And finally, it's going to be whatever we named it up here. Let's come back up here. So app.js, everything was named app.js, wasn't it? And so that now links to our development script once we've fired up the server. Okay, in order to fire up our servers, we're going to actually have two. We've got the PHP server and we've got the Webpack dev server. In order to fire both up, it's going to be a bit of a pain. We're going to have to open multiple terminal windows. So the best way to do this is to go back over to our package JSON file, and then if you see here, there's a scripts, and we're going to create two scripts. And the first script is going to be one called serve, and this is just going to mimic the same thing that we would get in Laravel. And so it's PHP server localhost, and we're going to put that on 8080 and -t public. So that's basically saying serve from the public folder, which is up here, as you can see. And we're going to then, if you remember earlier, we brought in Vue Webpack CLI, and so we can do that here as well. So we're going to do this HMR, which is hot module replacement, and we're just going to have this called Webpack dev server. So that fires up our dev server. That will automatically come down here and look up our Webpack config. Just tidy that up a little bit. Now, obviously, I've still got two scripts, so we're going to want to install something called npm run all. So if I come back over to the terminal here, I'm going to do npm install, and it is called npm run all, and just like everything else, save dev, like so. Hopefully that should pull that in. And once we've got that in, we can come over here and we can create a new script, and it basically uses npm run all to run both serve and HMR scripts in parallel. So we put npm run all and then parallel, then serve, and then HMR. So basically that's saying npm run all in parallel, the serve script and the HMR script here. And so we can just do that all in one go, but just by running npm run dev, which we'll take a look at now. So let's go back to our terminal and let's run that npm run dev, and hopefully, oops, I don't know why caps lock's on. Let's try that again, npm run dev, and hopefully it should run. Everything firing up. And oops, we seem to have an error, and it's telling me it can't resolve the components part, which, if you remember, that was when we were looking at aliases. So let me just shut that down for a second and come back over to my Webpack config and resources assets. Oh, I forgot to put JS in there. It's found in resources assets, JS components. So I just typed in the wrong path. So let's go over and let's try that again. We want to type in npm run dev like so, and hopefully that should be up and running. As you can see here, parallel serve HMR, that's our npm run all working, and it looks like it's all fired up correctly. So now let's go and have a look at that in a browser. And so we want to go to local host, and we want this is on port 8080. Hit enter, and hopefully, hello Lumen, I'm Vue. So our component has come up as displayed correctly. Let's come back over here. If you remember app.vue that we did what seems like an age ago, hello Lumen, I'm Vue. And so that's everything set up. And actually, let's go over here and check that the hot module reloading is working. Let's put in a bunch of those, and let's slide back over here. And yes, as you can see, the hot module reload has actually worked as well. So that's brilliant. So we've got that all set up. Okay, let's finish things up by actually making a call from our Vue component to our Lumen API. So to do that, we're going to come back over to web.php and we're going to create an API route. It's important that with the API routes that we put these above our Vue route so that it tries to match our API route first. So we're going to create a router, and we're going to create a router group, and that will have on it a prefix, and the prefix will be API, like so. So anything that has the prefix API, this route will try to resolve it, and then function. And then for this one, we're going to want to use router, like so. And just finish that up. And then what we're going to want to do is we're going to create our first one, which will be router get. And often you usually put a controller in here, but I'm just going to put a little closure in just to make it a little bit easier. And we're going to say return, and because Vue said hello to Lumen, maybe it would be nice if Lumen said hello to Vue. Hello Vue, nice to meet you, I'm Lumen. Okay, excellent. So we've set up our route for our API. So now we just want to go over to app.vue to call this route to make sure that we can actually call our API route. Before we do that, though, we're going to want to pull in Axios, which we can use to call our API routes. So let's come back over to the terminal, and we'll just kill that for a second. And we're going to do npm install Axios. Once again, save dev. Okay, now that's installed, we just want to come back over to our app.js over here, and we just want to import Axios. So import Axios from Axios, and then we just need to attach that to window so we can access that globally inside our app. So window Axios equals Axios. Fantastic. Now if we come over to app.vue, we can create a method, and we'll call this get message, and then I'm just going to type in Axios, and you can see here I've got a little snippet set up for this. So Axios G sets up my little Axios get snippet, and I'm going to try to call API. If you remember, if we looked at our roots over here, we prefix everything with API. So if I come back over here and call API, then you should we should get the message back. So I'm going to down here create data return, and we're going to call this message, and we'll start off with 0 like so, and then under here we'll have message like so, and I'm going to set this dot message equals response dot data. So that should set the message. Now when we create our Vue component, we want to call this dot get message like so. So now that should call that when we create it. And if we come back over to here, and I might need to hit refresh for this one. Oops, I've actually forgot to npm run dev. That would be helpful, wouldn't it? There we go, and let's come back over and refresh. There we go. Hello Lumen, I'm Vue, and it's called our endpoint and it says, hello Vue, nice to meet you, I'm Lumen. So that's everything up and running. That's Lumen, Vue.js, single file components, Webpack, and Axios all running on our Lumen system, ready for us to develop. So I hope you liked this video. It's taken me ages to get through it. You might notice that I might have snipped little bits and pieces together because it's quite complicated, and I've had quite a lot of notes to try to get through to get everything correct. Obviously, typing out an entire Webpack config isn't exactly straightforward. So hopefully, you've managed to get to exactly the same point as I have here. Leave a like on the video if you like it. Subscribe if you're enjoying this channel, and if something goes wrong with your setup, please feel free to leave a comment below, and I'll see if I can answer them. And that's everything for today, and I shall see you next time. Goodbye.